interesting to be thinking about questions you might want to ask me, so that I can really touch on things that I haven't quite answered. I want to talk about the two aspects of the work, the emotional aspect, why I want to make paintings, why I make small paintings and big paintings, and the different processes that are involved in doing that, but also the different technical aspects of the effort or the intonation to modify a tiny surface with small brushes, and then to the physicality or the action of making the big paintings. So there's that aspect of how the ideas become concrete objects, and how I get to grips with bringing these thoughts to bear on paper or the sketchbook, or that mush of crazy ideas that sort of floats through my head, and how they are then transformed. And I think most people, the question that they ask me is like, how do you get your ideas? And it's not a difficult question to ask, because I have lots and lots of visual archives of materials, research, drawings, collected photographs, and I read lots of books. Literature is really important to me. I listen to a lot of music, and so everything that is in the ether around me is fair game to be brought into the paintings. And obviously, my relationship with art history and the art of the past is massive, in terms of, and you'll see the trace of, say, the Goya's hat painting. There's a trace of Goya's presence in the physicality of how that's made, but also in terms of the mood and the darkness. And I've read two big biographies this year. Caravaggio by Andrew Dixon, again, dark and moody images, and the Robert Hughes guy earlier this year. I read the Robert Hughes biography, it was fantastic, I recommend it. So I'm thinking, well, Goya's hat with the candles, he would paint in the evening with this hat and candles. So how privileged are we to be able to work, and how much do I complain about everything? And Christine's constantly hearing me say, Picasso never had this trouble, when I've got to go and collect the kids for swimming, or they run them to here or there, or I've got to get this done for such and such a time. But you think about the trials that Goya and Caravaggio had to deal with their clients, Catholic Church, or that painting's not good enough when it's offending someone. I've got the option to offend everybody that I like, and I think I need that cathartic process of getting these complaints or there definitely is the reasons for making all these paintings, and they're quite specifically honed towards a final and constructed meaning for me. That doesn't mean to say that there is one way of interpreting the works. You will all bring your personal histories to bear when you read these pictures, and there'll be different priorities that you will have in terms of how you interpret what is there. So I want them to have a bit of ambiguity. I want them to be open-ended in terms of how they sit in their presence, but I also want to be quite specific at times with the titles. And so you notice that sometimes a wee bit leaning towards a bit of a joking thing, and others I'll be thinking to myself, it's going to be so specific. The paintings Christine is called in the skin of a tiger. Not just like I'll refer to the little tiger painting. I'm thinking about, I'm listening to the Stranglers, and there's a song, Get a Grip on Yourself. And it's like all these kind of pop quizzes, like it's get a open inverted open brackets, grip, close brackets on yourself. And it's like I'm thinking that's in because I want to draw attention to the surface of the painting, the skin of the picture. I'm thinking it's actually in the open brackets, skin, close brackets of a tiger. And so I'm having these kind of thoughts when I'm reading Memories of the Night by Scott Fitzgerald, and I'm thinking, well, people talk about the sound of the words, or just the look of the words on the page. And I think there's this sort of crafted situation. Paintings have a certain volume of sound. Paintings have a certain touch and clarity of surface. And the different materials that I use, whether it's on canvas, sort of touch of the brush on canvas, or whether it's on board, where I can really be physically tactile with that. So, say for instance, an image like this is pretty where I would start. Pretty much it's like a drawing. It became a bits of paper on top eventually. But that was actually started off as a kind of buff type, plain black and white image. And I'll make lots and lots of little studies in sketchbooks on this paper where I'll be thinking out loud in terms of creating spaces. So, potentially making marks on a surface, or just, say, I'm sort of thinking out loud in this colour, bits of paper and pastel surfaces and working wet to wet and allowing the paint or allowing the pastel or the charcoal or the ink just to move around on the surface so that I can then start to develop initial thoughts. So I'll put my thoughts on paper. I will then find sources, maybe you can use paperclip or whatever, and that will suggest something. Or we might go away to a festival for the weekend. So there's amalgam of lots of different sources that come together to create a finished piece. So that this picture here sat without the figure and the dog or the butterfly and the birds for quite a while. Well, I wondered to myself, what sort of scale is that? What sort of presence do I want it to have? And so these things can alter in terms of how they're seen. And what was important to me was that sort of U-shaped sort of pathway into the picture. So the initial distribution of light and dark on the surface is very much about trying to create space. The big paint here, you see this not raw canvas, but the initial surface of the canvas. It's not been made through conventional perspective. In fact, I don't think any of them have got any conventional perspective in this sort of railway line type fashion. I'm always constructing them from the back of the picture to the front of the picture, almost like a stage set with drops coming down in succession, so that the scale of things, something that sits in front of something, almost like Indian miniatures or Chinese painting, will create the space. So from the back to the front, I initially put down a contrasting orange-blue ground. So it was very much, it was kind of pinky bits underneath as well. But I got spray enamel paint underneath the bottom here. And it was like a wall of orange. And these big dots, shapes in here, formed a sort of a change in size from really small blue dots to really big blue dots. So that created space. So that perspectives created by the different size of the dots. I actually thought of it as something like a sea or a fluid space. My ideas were fluid at that time as well. So I was thinking about, I was going to have swimmers, caps, and I'm watching the Olympics with the people with the numbers on their heads. And, everything is there in terms of me thinking, how can I make the space work and pictures work. In the end, I started to be sitting thinking, we faced south and we got a big garden, not a big garden, a small enclosed garden, but we've got quite big flowers and permaculture. It's chaotic, As soon as you tidy up, it's 3 days later, it's chaos. And we've made ourselves I've made a sort of called a hippie hideaway with a bench, and we've also, around the Christmas time, I bought a chimney and fires. So that's where the title of the exhibition comes from, Fire in the Garden. So this painting became Fire in the Garden, but that's because there was poppies and rose shape and sunflower. Got devil horns in the sunflower. So for me it was like morning racing. Right. How often have I got to shout, get out of your bed, you know, before I get the Weetabix, and if we don't get out the door by 8:05, we're going to be late for school, blah, 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 blah. So it was like racing in the morning, and then I'd drop the kids off to school, and that moment of calm, where I'd walk down Lothian Road, and suddenly I'm passing William Hill Betting Shop, and there's racing from Warrenbunga or somewhere in the middle of Australia at 8:45 in the morning. I'm thinking, what is going wrong with the world? Someone else to complain about. So I imagined that this sort of morning racing situation with the flowers and all that beautiful nature out there, maybe the lights just touching the top of that thing. And you can hear me, saying the kids who were away in Edinburgh, staying at a caravan up near Donald, and I'd say, now look at the tone of the sky compared to the tone of the sea. And then an hour later, remember that bit that was light? It's now dark. So I'm talking about this almost through the whole day. I talk to myself a lot, just in London. But I spent days looking at this, so whilst I'm getting up every morning, I'm looking out the window and thinking, look at the way the sun shines coming in there, etc., etc. And also at Edinburgh, I'm thinking, now if you went to the end of the world and the horizon was there, it would actually be bent. Do you understand that, girls? Fuck, I've got $2, 6 and 3. And I say, just that bit at the end of the world where there's a hub where you almost just fall off. So this picture is sort of constructed, made up from the light that hits the water at a certain time of day, and also the tones. And I realised it changes so much that I could actually make this up to fit a moment. And so I almost relinquished control in terms of the material, tone, colour, relationships. Eventually, you see we're surrounded by, described it as disturbing, menacing, dark, whatever, by dark animal nature on the wall. But then, the lightness in my life comes through where my younger daughter Ella is bounding straight into the picture with that sort of blondish hair, pink tights and red dress. The red dress is great against the green, So I'm thinking, I'm reading Caravaggio, Ella's hair is like Medusa. So this was a Medusa thought, Medusa Ella, and she was actually in a different picture. It's the wrong size, it's the wrong scale. So sometimes the props or the characters can go from this picture to that picture. And as I say, I work on lots and lots of pictures at the same time. So for me, it's a nice break to change scale from this scale to this scale in terms of something that becomes a small thought and then becomes a sort of operatic experience. I'm almost laughing to myself when I'm thinking about rooster racing from Colin Baines Green. When the Olympics were on, my daughters wanted to do like gymnastics on the curb. We were on the beach and we're doing making a smear in the sand, we're doing the sort of the floor exercises. So you're letting the sort of performance of your everyday existence and the laugh that you have, or the dramas that you have, that come into the pictures. So that when I'm in the studio and I knock over a glass or a jar of yellow ochre cadmium yellow paint, I'm faced with picking up this, not with my hands, but with a bit of cardboard, and I've scraped the glass on top of the picture, thinking, that looks juicy. It's also a bit dangerous. So there's always things that are mishaps, as I say, the castle never had this trouble, that you can pick up and then make into something that hopefully is attractive, beautiful, or a concrete object that's definitely tangible, it's a thing, but it has a talismanic effect of its own that leads you somewhere else. So this yellow paint sat on that surface, seemed like maybe 2 or 3 months, just lying there thinking. And I think it's one day I come into the studio and I start to squeeze something over, and immediately I've got space starting to be created. And the mood or the atmosphere starts to take effect. And even when I'm doing the so-called mundane things, like sitting on the bus or whatever with the kids, and I take 2 of the kids to school as well, pretending they're not with me when they're talking to all on Sunday on the top of the bus when people are going to go to work. You're thinking that that space is still existing in my head. I'm passing William Hills, or even, you know, sometimes I'm reflecting on the chaos or the mayhem that you have behind you. You know, when you know, I used to gamble a lot, and there's a nod to that sort of the demons of discord. So you could be, you know, these horses could be racing up Lothian Road in your head if you're a gambler thinking about, how can I get on this phone here or whatever. So there's a number of different things that filter through from my experience both now but also in the past. And having young children, I'm maybe reflecting a bit on things that interest that I would never see, like forest skills. Went to this weekend where there was, you know, kids were making paper necklaces and making clay things and wax candles and all such of things. And, this little forest skills painting, it was very much about me learning how to build a fire properly. Again, you know, the fire in the garden is taking on a different sort of feeling, thinking. If I paint smoke at that size painting, I can get away with being a wee bit sort of fudgy with just a sort of wispy mixture of raw umber and French ultramarine to get a nice silvery grey, mix it with some translucent zinc white. But if I do the same thing, in terms of giving myself the problem, no, the challenge of paint smoke on that scale up here, I'm thinking you've got to make it a bit more solid and constructed. So I'm thinking, yeah, I'm going to look at Fernand Léger, he does blocking things, or George Braque, there's solidity to these things. So I'm referring to the canon of my favourite artists in history to try and fix that sort of problem. And that might be thinking, well, geometry, that's really important to me. Where I'm thinking of the rectangle within the square, Mondrian, another hero guy in terms of the grid and the structure. So again, this surface here, with another fire in it, will sit with this triangle here, and this square, and this rectangle, and there's space created because of the light coming forward, and then there's this. If it was a painting, if it was a football match, this would be the penalty box down here. This is where the activity is. What's going on in that tent? That's the question. So some of the paintings ask questions, and some of them are couched in the physicality of the making and the physicality of, or the conception of how they exist in terms of geometry, mathematics. And so there's that conception of me thinking really quite succinctly, what does a Giorgione tree look like? And how is that constructed? In this picture you start with 2 trees down the side. What seems like one, so I thought, it's just really boring. It's a boring picture. So I had to reconstruct and do more drawings and then start to fathom out other things in the picture. The glazing effect on this one as well, because there's a thin, translucent beeswax surface. The paint is mixed and it becomes see-through. The paint on here, with the opaque initial statements, has curtains of colour flooding over the surface. So, in one fell swoop, I'm thinking of geometry and maths for half an hour. I'm thinking of Goldilocks. How thick or how thin should this bucket of stuff be? Trying to think about how much that bucket's cost me to mix before I chuck it on or pour it off or place the paper on the floor and then have a sort of a dance around it. Sometimes I'm thinking, when you wait until the drums come in and that track that I listened to before I sort of go bang, on the surface, you have these really playful attitudes to making the thing in the studio. Everybody thinks, I mean, when you look at the darkness, when I go home someday and say, oh, I don't know, I'd spent about an hour, I don't know what I was doing, I just completely destroyed this thing that I was working on for, you know, and then I go in the next day and I say, it looks okay. Very hard to judge what you're making, how you're making it. But it's also, for me, comforting to know that if you've got so many of them, you can afford to almost lose them. You can afford to sort of just go, well, what if I do this, I'll try that, and, you know, and it's a gut instinct. So there's reason, you know, considered reason at the extreme in terms of constructing things. Or there's torment or mayhem that you can reflect upon. Or there's things that are unexpected that can happen that suddenly throw up new possibilities. And I think if you can embrace that opportunity to take something that was unexpected and make that new thing. And even, you know, you start to realise that I painted this picture of horses before, and I used to call the painting this. It's the rears of the charging chasseurs. Sounds really exotic, doesn't it? You know, it's like sword fencing with Delacroix. The rears of the charging chasseurs. And then I thought, I'm going to paint the cows' arses this time, you know. And then I'm going to make cows and moon. Cows and moon's quite different to mooning cows, you know. So there's different kinds of nuances you can bring to finishing off the painting. Timing's important. And the cows have got numbers on them because in the sky the stars have numbers on them. There's a big relationship with nature. And going up the woods, collecting wood so we can make fire in the garden. Next door neighbours have a barbecue, get the next door neighbours washing, smelling like hauled sausages. And there's yeah, I've complained about, you know, these farmers and their milk or whatever. So you're sometimes thinking, I want to paint about that, you know. The bramble, Napoleon's brambles. That was a painting that I had to get out of my system. We've had an upstairs neighbour, and relations could be a bit better, could be a lot better, because our daughter used to climb. Just there's a triangle of ground which has got nothing on it, just kind of chippings and stuff. She used to climb through the garden and over the fence and play with her friend in the trampoline. 2 or 3 kids over there, and the kids used to come backwards and forwards. And because Dad get home, I say, just cross the fence. Anybody gives you any hassle, darling, just you come back and see me. And so I used to think, good old Jessie, she's not scared that the man upstairs is going to, because he's got kids as well, going to give her a ride. And he's a Frenchman. So this is Jessie, the Gorilla Girl, and the painting's called Napoleon's Brambles and Gorilla Girl. Because he built a barrier where the kids are crossing the fence. Let's just say we had words about it. A week after we had words, someone set fire to his hedge. And luckily, one of the other neighbours saw some young people running away. Of course, my sister was convinced that I must have had something to do with this. But Christine says, fire in the garden, you've got to paint the burning hedge now. So, above Rock here, we've got the burning hedge, a little devil in the corner, and a devilish figure in the flames of the sky. So that's where the cathartic process of exercising that sort of wee bit of titillation, you know, on these brambles. Napoleon conquering Spain and bits of Europe. You know, we've got our small enclosed bit of garden with a pirate flag, and the pirate flag. Jessie had a pirate party in April. Of course, I went into the studio to make a pirate ship with spray paint, and then I made a Jolly Roger. I was away for ages, wasn't I?
Yeah.
Before I came back. And
nearly missed the party.
Yeah, before I came back and then painted Cinderella's head on the cake for it seemed to be like the 4th or 5th time. I'm becoming quite good at Cinderella heads on cakes with, I may say, food coloring, not paint. stay a lot easier with oil paint. So one day, when I'm at home with the kids, and I'm doing my sort of abstract phase of diagonal hoovering, you know, just I find a tiny Cinderella head. I'm thinking, oh, that's amazing, this is tiny, look at the detail in that. And so Cinderella's head, came about thinking, well, in the bedroom jungle, the usual state of the bedroom is, you know, getting up and bits of Lego under your feet or whatever, and chaos. So there's a little crocodile, a little wee monster, and sometimes the kids come to you and say, oh Daddy, I've got a guinea pig like that as well. You know, I say, well, that is your guinea pig, the fat cat machine. And it was a green guinea pig that I started off with, and I'm thinking, it's just too much like a toy. And even if I put it against the light, so with a backdrop of the sunlight coming through, it's still not dark enough for it not to be a toy. So I swapped it, took it home and got one of the yellow ochre, a bit more like gold. Because the guinea pig became embroiled with this little fat cat that I found. So I've got all these kids' toys in the studio that somehow come into the pictures. And then I decided one day to put the fat cat on top of the guinea pig, because in effect, the fat cat machine is about, we are ultimately the guinea pig, and these fat cats are doing the business on top of us. They're in charge. And so that idea developed. You must think, what am I thinking when I'm picking up various? Because I'm very specific with what I pick up, but I picked it up, the yellow one up, because it was a bit like gold, and I could make it like gold in the paint. And in a way, there's quite a bit of alchemy involved if you're taking the raw material of paint, or the raw material of dirt, of earth, and changing that into gold. So that's how that picture came about. Again, the hot dog that's next to it is another fire in the garden, or it alludes to a fire in the garden. Big bit of orange, big bit of blue, grey space, and the pop-out-eyed Dalmatian is pretty much a self-portrait after 3.5 cans of Stella and barbecues buzzing away, and the Jimmy Cliff is firing out the window at high volume on an Bose sound system in the middle of the summer. Bliss. So that's the celebration of, you know, self-portrait. It's called hot dog. Pretty alludes to the barbecue, etc. So that's another relationship to the fire in the garden, because I had various titles in my head before I came up with it. 5 to 6 in the morning, eureka moments, fire in the garden. The first title that I thought about is in relation to my newfound interest in the novelist Stephen King. I'd always been a bit snooty about Stephen King, thinking, you know, he's a supreme stylist, and he's something, in this book that I found in a charity shop, he relates to bits of music where he's talking about the, you know, Come and Feel the Noise by Slade is actually spelled C-U-N, and noise is with a Z. Not a lot of people know that. So he's got wee bits of snippets of American music in his books. I'm thinking, that's great, you know, I like the oddness of these things. And I quite like the oddness of hearing him talk on Desert Island Discs. And this guy's weird choices for weird reasons. And so I looked up on YouTube. And anyway, I thought, after we got up on this, nobody called the exhibition, Stephen King is my soul brother. You know, I want something, you might call it something. I went, and it's no quite right. And then I went on to 2 or 3 other suggestions. Thinking, Talking to the Stars, as one of the kids says, when Mummy and I and Jessie, and Jessie went camping at Gullah Beach, we got up in the middle of the night, went out and we were talking to the stars. Kids say to me, like, Daddy, I can see my eyes in yours. And then after they say, can you see mine? So that title comes through something that they said to me. So then, rather than say, let's put a portrait of Jessie, or Jessie, portrait that's in the window with her back to us, you know, that's small enough and that's not detailed enough so that you're picking up painting, but if I painted a face in us, immediately that would change, it would age. We've got lots of photographs to refer to, hundreds of photographs. But the painting doesn't just depict Jessie in her present state, looking at the picture. It's very much about the changes in our lives, because the kids have started the Gaelic school, and Jessie is now been there for long enough. She's speaking this Gaelic, and we're struggling to help her with her homework. And so that painting is called How the Words Are Spoken, because she speaks with such confidence in school, and all our lessons Gaelic, but very rarely we hear her speak Gaelic outside the school, not like this. So she's facing away, and the title adds something to the art, or the suggestion of what might be going on in the picture, in my mind. The sense of freedom that I've found since leaving the art school, it sounds terrible, leaving an institution and you feel immediately 10 times more creative. It's a bit like if you give up gambling, you get so much more time to occupy yourself in terms of positive means. And the always be a unicorn is a wee bit about this new reality that I'm faced with, which is always be a unicorn is about that, the imagination of seeing the little unicorn, the little horse or whatever in the house. But then painting with the reality of the pack of horses and then the imagination unicorn. But also the fact that the flags are out, there's a sort of morning dawn type light, and there's this kind of fleeing from the scene. For me, that was always very much about leaving the art school. But the other unicorn thing is, I'm such a sucker that gets to say, "Can you paint another unicorn, Daddy?" I said, well, I quite like painting that unicorn the last time, so that's another unicorn. Yeah. And the one next to it, summer. It became summer and autumn. Probably more like summer and winter, because Ella's got the winter red coat on and the spotty hat, and and Jessie's got a swing which is way too high. It just increases the drama. They're just at different parts, different corners of the picture. But that picture just became me down in the mechanics looking at a tree, just drawing the mechanics. And then we were in the Lake District, and I started to think back to that drawing that I made, and I was taking lots and lots of photographs on the phone of trees to make this picture work. So these photographic sources form one wing of my thought process in terms of how I'm filtering these choices. So there's a disparate amalgam of things that come to bear. But I'm also thinking, they're getting a wee bit sentimental, maybe, can you be a bit romantic, or, like, I love William Blake, and sort of a bit of, Samuel Palmer there, so when I dropped Ella off at nursery, I've been spending quite a lot of time in the fine art library, looking through and doing a lot of reading as a backdrop. So that influences just as much how I read my own photographs, and then how I go back to reality to confuse these things. So that dark mood is very much a nod to the presence of Samuel Palmer, the work, and also the title, At the Skirt of a Wood, acknowledges that the Samuel Palmer painted picture called something exactly the same, the skirt of a wood. It's similar, very similar. So I don't want to hide these influences because they're very important. Of course, there's a great big dollop of Scooby-Doo in this one as well. Get back from the school bus arrives, right, can we watch Scooby-Doo, or have we got any Scooby-Doos on the hard drive, disk? So, it's at the skirt of it, on the edge, but this dark reality, or this dark future, or this unknown is beyond the picture frame. In the same way that the skin of the painting, the skin of a tiger is the skin of the painting and the tiger painting. The surface of this is dark, and it's also, there's a void within there. And so the exactly the same height, and takes the space back again in the same way that the space from the early stage of the picture to the latter stages, where you have this really bright pink hitting exactly the centre, creating a triangle here, here, and then this hammock of form that comes through here. So I thought in drawings of back to the geometry of how these things are placed. So something that comes about by virtue of the initial stages of perspective placement, and then scale of certain things, you know, morning racing, booster racing in Colin Mains Green, and greyhound racing from Wollabunga, in Australia, little devilish flowers in the garden. Because with nature, with the organic forms that you find at different times of the day in different lights, you're pretty much, you know, involved in operatic, or, you know, turning the volume up quite a bit to make these things work for yourself. You've got a free rein to go and change colours, or change the drama as you feel fit. But I kept a lot of these warm reds, you know, Venetian red, Mars red, burnt sienna. So the kind of palette has been kept, and then there's this nice rose madder, suggestion of poppies and darkness. And this is almost like a little figure here as well, eyes and mask and things. So I'm trying to keep it open-ended so that it isn't too. I don't want to paint just our garden, you know. And that's again, I don't think I could paint. I mean, I painted the little one in the window is of a sunflower like this. And it's not the Vincent van Gogh sunflower, you know, the glow and noise. This is a sort of, at the end of the summer, a wilting, dark sunflower. Is it a self-portrait? I don't know. You know. At the autumn of my life, painting pictures of dark, moody sunflowers. So this started off here, and then the little painting, which started off as a study for this one, became complete. Because I thought, I had a great big circle here, and a big form here, and the little one became really easy. So they are like my babies, the paintings. You know, they're often the great folks. But sometimes the big paintings, when you've got all this buckets of stuff and materials, they naturally produce small paintings. So that the colours that might be used here filtrate into, what's the colour over here, or that brown may be seen over here. So the kind of temperature changes, you know, much cooler situation, or, you know, mid-November, maybe we get a heat off this, you know. That's an important thing as well in terms of keeping attack on the control of tone-colour relationships in relation to the viscosity I mentioned earlier, the translucency, and the temperature of the colour. I also nodded to the volume of the picture. I think paintings can shout at you, and paintings can have a certain calm. The black pigs, I wanted this to be, it's a wee bit of a show-off painting. You know, I wanted to paint, eventually we got to the stage where we paint the moonlight. And if you ever want to paint moonlight, burnt sienna mixed with French ultramarine is the perfect moonlight colour. And I got to the stage where this became about a wee bit of a self-portrait, the good life, you know, living off the land, happy as pigs and shit sort of thing. And these little pigs. And the picture was totally complete when I put the moonlight, the rising moon, at the top of the picture. And it just lit up the whole thing, and then I was able to complete these sort of slightly cabbagey things that we've got in the garden. Everything, you know, you wonder what you're looking at. Is that a courgette? Not like the courgette you find in Tesco's, you know. It's like the garden permaculture type thing. So that picture for me became something that I wanted to show as an image of calm, contentedness, but also in terms of making it a bit of an image of awe, where you're looking and thinking, what size of brushes do you use to make that? You know, number 00. And it's very much the same sort of mood as the other one I spoke about in terms of at the start of drawing. where I'm possibly another self-portrait looking into this chaotic space behind me. No, there's no buildings in any of the pictures. I never painted buildings. I kind of just dawned on me earlier this year that I don't think I've ever painted any buildings. No doubt somebody will remind me, but there's suggestion of things, as the rainfall, there's natural forms, and I listened to this track by a band called Leninger called Ramblin' Man. I think that's fantastic. If you're rambling, and there's this distance behind there. So this figure was the last thing to be put in. I spent a lot of time constructing these marks, and the thoughts that are going through my head when I'm making decisions about placement, geometry, size, scale. I spend a lot of time in the studio on a measuring tape thinking, or I'll maybe put a bit of string from here to here, or from the diagonal to diagonal, so that I can know. Something you do naturally in a small scale, you have to kind of work out that, yeah, that is the centre line there. So that placement is like really important. You can work out here, and then you transfer and build. And I use the word build because you build in these pictures. They're not, for me, they are painted, but they're constructed. This has got to sit there first, that's going to dry, it's going to leave it time before I then put the next layer on. You know, sometimes I'm a builder, sometimes I'm a drifter. Sometimes just drift from. And it's okay to let the pictures ferment for a long time. They sit there like an open stage, and I've got lists of characters and props. I've got little post-it notes on my studio door to remind me that I've got to paint that picture about the whale, or there's the one about the wrestling angels, or there's the, because I've just found something about that's a great image, I've got to paint that. And most of these things will never ever reach the light of day. Or 6 months later I'm saying, that was a daft idea. But you've got to document who you might be and what you might be thinking about all the time. And you sometimes expose a bit too much, or you think I'm going to offend somebody by making this picture, but luckily in a gallery like this I've got the opportunity to offend anybody, to make pictures that can be slightly provocative, or make paintings that, the bride painting is not one that ultimately people are going to be attracted to because of the mask-like, skeleton bride that's who's shrunk herself to fit into that dress after months, arriving at this false promise of going shopping to the Guile every weekend. I'm such a cynic, aren't I? And the cobalt blue heavy sky, and then there's more kind of fire and chaos. Are the relations going to speak to each other? How drunk is so-and-so going to get? He can't be wearing that wedding with his training shoes on his head. For me, it encompasses lots and lots of attitudes to the conventions that we all have to fit into. I'm sure that some union that's happening on the other side of the world, on a desert island, or an unknown kind of forest somewhere, where people are standing with virtually no clothes on, entering to union with no guests, whatever, might be a bit richer than the conventions that we place upon or expect from each other. So that picture's kind of charged and loaded as well. And I think I've probably touched on most of the pictures now. I've tried to nod to how they connected with each other. And there's for me quite clear connections in terms of the areas that I've investigated for this show. I always want to make a show that is a constructive argument, that there is some sort of intention that I want to bring to bear in terms of how the works connect and how they're read. And luckily, the title for me kind of pulled a number of pictures together, and other titles might have given a different kind of outcome. that. So I've probably succeeded in representing the things that I enjoy in life, and hopefully you might see the exhibition as somewhat of a celebration of my state of mind and life at this moment, with 2 young kids and complaining about the castle that I'm in this problem. I've probably got another 40 paintings in the studio that are ongoing at the moment, and these are the ones, if it was like the X Factor, these are the ones that got through the book camp and are on the wall. The other ones have been rejected for the time being, but they might have the legs to last a lot longer. I let surfaces or stage sets sit for a while and play in visual memory is a huge thing in terms of remembering something that you saw, experienced, or collected, and matching them up to surfaces and grounds. And then you have the confidence to say that surface that I started, it's sort of that morning light, and there's a sort of nice, something that I've seen in the garden, and I'm thinking, why did I paint the trampoline? And why did I paint a little angelic figure floating in the sky? That comes next. So some of these surfaces are just waiting for something to happen. Something we can see. I go to a festival and I see someone with this bear parrot, I'm thinking, that's nuts. In the bus coming in today, we saw this hen party, they're little sweet 1 years and everything. Thinking, there's my camera, that's fantastic. That could end up one of my paintings. Obviously, there's a twist in terms of how you collect, pick that up, and how you make that work. Because in different contexts, it'll just look slightly dark, but it won't work. So that the harmony of keeping these colour ranges together. If I made that a big yellow dog, it wouldn't quite work. So you're constantly in control of these. That's a warm one, that's a cool one, that's a textured one, that's a sort of tea time light in November one. I'm thinking, and I've got in the run-up to the exhibition, I had a book of all the paintings that are possibly going to fix. Just sitting in the bus in number 27, reading F. Scott Fitzgerald, and then thinking, I'll book out cows' arses, finish tomorrow. I'll write it down, because I'll be thinking of something else when I get in, watching Inspector Montalbano or something, and see that camera angle, that's like a Giorgio de Chirico, it's a real space, that's fantastic. Inspector Christine puts up with a hell of a lot. Of me and my running commentary, whatever I watch on telly, or melancholic moods that are not quite, they're not quite talking that night about something because I'm thinking, I solve that picture. Because the pictures are in your head all the time. So the deadline gives you an urgency to complete. Edinburgh was almost chucked away. I was thinking, it just isn't working. And something to get a bit darker and darker, but it isn't working. And then suddenly, a camera phone picture that I had of Ella during the day, I'm thinking I can adapt that, and I can bring in my Martin Scorsese lighting and give it a bit of a halo, like a Beyonce video. All these different things come before, No, I think it might have been.
How do you compare such things?
I think it might have been the Strangler Strange Little Girl video with the young punks with the sunshine hitting their hair. Thinking that's fantastic. So there's suddenly you go, Eureka, that's the thing that's going to fix that picture. Yeah. That's the thing that's going to sort that one. And then they just come out, and the actual painting number is easy. But the skill should always be the service of an idea, and the conception happens up here. The conceptual argument of people making installations, inverted commas, in spaces only makes the job of the painter richer. If you bring ideas to the fore in the paintings, it's raised the game. A lot of the stuff that people paint, maybe we've got cameras for that kind of thing now. So you've got to do your job in making paintings much more theatrical, a bit richer in terms of letting the paint speak first and foremost. And it's hard to keep a tab on that physicality. So when I've been able to work in the studio almost every day, maybe a bit in the evening, a whole day the next day, that's the thing that keeps me in tune with my language. Because the language isn't titles, the language isn't writing, the language is manipulating paint. And that's the key thing, that to be in touch with that, in terms of that viscosity, thickness, thinness, you need to be on that game, touching that surface, embracing these textures and glosses, and giving yourself a pat on the back sometimes, saying, I don't think, I go home and say, I'm a genius. And then next thing I'm thinking, what am I doing? Why did I do that first? Like, just useless at this thing. You can go through these kind of roller coaster of thoughts, and it drives you nuts. But that's why I do it. If it was easy, you wouldn't even get involved with it. So, when I wake up, just going to say, did you get up at 2:30 in the morning or middle of the night and go through the kitchen and make a drawing? Open the fridge door, get the fridge door light, and I did a drawing for this one, the original drawing. Had sort of little doll-like figures hanging, and it was kind of black birds with beady eyes, and there was spooky sort of, Halloween type faces. Halloween's coming up. Who knows what's going to happen next week? 2 weeks' time. When I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, fridge door open.
Oh, that's not great. Good Francis Bacon.
Hiya.
Hi. So finished your call?
Yeah. Any more questions?
I think you've answered.
Yeah. As I said to Ivy, I've got to stop myself then. Once I get started.
Almost bang on 45 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well done.
And very interesting. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
No, thanks for coming. I mean, I said, if I can't talk about the paintings, I can't really talk about anything, can I really? They're kind of their party here. Okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.